road less traveled, better late than never.
Look, it's a thin line between faith and folly. People say they keep it real, but I keep it godly. Shout out my squad, they forever solid. Been through ups and downs and they never change, so I know they got me. Them hard times getting harder, 24 years old and making room for my daughter. Showing her the lessons I acquired from time and teach her how to keep it G when the friends start to falter. Just keep an eye for your foes, the ones that hate to see you win. Baby, pay attention when the brothers speak, and don't compare me to them dudes that you used to G. A real brew, live in the flesh, you ain't got a dream. And real talk, I wanna put you in that double G.
Stressing on the beat, yo.
Most people get comfortable. They stop growing, they stop working on themselves, they stop stretching, they stop pushing themselves, and they end up becoming very cynical about life, and they throw in the towel on themselves, on their families, and on their dreams. And the other thing is that most people don't feel worthy.
Nevertheless, all right, so tonight's lesson is Vaccination Experimentation Part 2. All right, so we're going to start getting into Part 2. Same lesson I was going into last month. I'm going to go and continue that lesson this month. All right, if you missed Part 1, you go back, review it. So nevertheless, let's get into it. First things first. So the biggest thing we're seeing right now being pushed, not only in America, but in many other places throughout the world, there's this big drive to get vaccinated. There's a strong presence that the vaccine is the answer to turning this COVID, this pandemic around. All right? So now, that really isn't the case, but more so rather it's being pushed as part of an agenda that's had by whether you want to say the elites, 1%, whatever it is, things of that nature. Some may say, oh, conspiracy theory. Not conspiracy. It's things they've said blatantly. It's agendas they've blatantly put in front of us for many years. Not just the past 2, 3, not even the past decade, but for many years, it's always been the same agenda to destroy us. That's it. That's the heart of it. So some of the things we're going to look at today is understanding whether or not you believe your enemy, not your friend, because some people still have a hard time accepting the so-called white man is not your friend. He's not your buddy. He is your enemy as a people. It doesn't matter how many nice things you feel that he gives you, he's still your enemy. Someone could take you out to dinner, give you flowers, and still rape you, still murder you. So don't think a gift is something that makes someone just a good person. Scripture deal with that. The wicked, they know how to give good gifts to their children. They know that being wicked don't mean I'm over here, and beating all my kids, things of that nature. No, I give. Wicked can spoil their kids with better gifts than some of the righteous. That doesn't mean that they're good. You got to see what the Most High defines as good and evil. And these people are evil and have been nothing but evil. So now, a few scriptures we're going to get. Go ahead and get the book of Job, chapter 13 and verse 4. You can look at these people have your best interest in heart. Best interest at heart when it comes down to their pharmaceuticals, to conventional medicine that's used today through these vaccines. Go ahead and read Job chapter 13, verse 4. I'm going to go over a few scriptures to preface the lesson.
The book of Job 13 and verse 4. But ye are forgers of lies.
They are forgers of lies. When you forge something, you're crafting, you're making it. You ever see that show, Forge and Fire? You're crafting these things, you're making these things. They're making lies and propaganda to make you believe vaccines are safe, efficient. You need it. That without it, you'd perish. We have rampant illnesses and diseases. Read on.
Ye are all physicians of no value.
Because really, when you look at it, so many physicians, so much modern medicine, but yet and still, diseases are higher than ever. You would think with an influx of conventional medicine and medical doctors, we would have a strong decrease in terms of illnesses and diseases. But yet and still, over the years, it's only been going up, increasing. So now, from there, let's go ahead and get Jeremiah, chapter 30 and verse 13.
Book of Jeremiah 30 and verse 13.
Go ahead.
There is none to plead thy cause, that thou mayest be bound up. Thou hast no healing medicines.
So we have no healing medicine. With all of this, because once again, conventional practices of medicine don't really look to cure illnesses, disease, they look to treat it. A lot of things are suppressive medicines or things that they prescribe something to you to where they believe the risk in taking it is lower than the reward you can gain through actually consuming it or having the procedure. That's how they work. The problem is there's still a high risk. That's one of the problems. There's still a high risk. Well, here again, they always read everything fast, you know. So my options are, I can choose not to take the vaccine and get COVID in this modern day and age, or I can choose to take the vaccine and possibly get autism or some other autoimmune disease and, you know, and epilepsy or stroke, things of that nature, possibly die. And it's like, golly, I'll take my chances with COVID. Man, and COVID. You can still get COVID, you know, because some of you guys may have seen it. I posted it, and I'll find it again. Anthony Fauci, he said when asked in an interview, and I'll go through and look for the interview and part of it because I want to show part of it, actually, now that I think about it. He actually said, you know what, at this point in time, we're not even sure if the COVID vaccine actually prevents COVID. He said that in an interview, amongst other things, that he was very uncertain. Because people are asked, well, how long do we have to wear the mask? He said, no, there's still a lot of disease everywhere. You know, we can't yet stop wearing the mask. Got to keep wearing the mask. Well, you know, is it effective at stopping, you know, COVID? Is the vaccine effective at stopping? Well, we're not sure if the vaccine is effective at stopping, you know, stopping you from getting COVID. And it's like, why get it? Why get it then? He's supposed to be the lead. Go ahead, man. We pass her the mic. If not, I can repeat what you say. Go ahead. Well, they won't still be able to hear you online.
It's like the senior building where I live. First, it started right before Thanksgiving. One of the staff had COVID. And
Right.
so they told everybody to like self-quarantine, and the staff stopped working in the office. They only work if we have an emergency, and they'll just like have one person on staff. And so now what they've done is they've had a lot of the people there, and everyone is elderly. So what they've done is they've partnered with CVS. So they're coming out on the 1st, February 1st, and they're going to go to each person's unit, and they have to have their insurance card, and they have to sign a consent form to have the shot. And they've been sending out notices that, oh, it'll really help you, you know, it'll work with your body, and there's nothing to fear, you know. And a lot of people are talking about like it's going to really help them, and they're looking forward to taking the shot. And
Right.
it's really sad. It's really sad. Thank you.
I believe that. You know what? I found a video. Let me actually, I'm going to play it. Go ahead, AV. May you go ahead, and I'm about to plug in this course. They can hear the audio. I'm about to play it. So hold on. Let me pull that up. I was finding it while listening to your point, and I did hear everything that you were saying, my elder sister. Let me go ahead and stop mirroring this because I just want you to hear this video. I find it comical. Our beloved Bishop, Tazai Juan Ariala, also shared this video. Go ahead, get this set up. I want to go ahead and get this real quick. Bam. Go ahead and thought it was going to take me a lot longer to find it. All right. Let me see. All right, let's see. Can we move to PowerPoint? Beautiful. Let's go ahead and share this. See if we can hear it. Double check online. Let me know if you have.
What's the answer?
Well, the answer is unless you get the overwhelming majority of the country vaccinated and protected and get that umbrella of what we call herd immunity.
I'm sorry.
Section for you here. All right. Just some questions that keep coming up.
Okay.
Why do I have to keep wearing the mask after I get the vaccine? I thought it was going to protect me from the vaccine. What's the answer?
Well, the answer is unless you get the overwhelming majority of the country vaccinated and protected and get that umbrella of what we call herd immunity, there's still a lot of virus out there.
There's still a lot of virus out there.
So just because you're protected so-called protected by the vaccine, you need to remember that you could be prevented from getting clinical disease and still have the virus that is in your nasopharynx because you could get infected. We're not sure at this point that the vaccine protects you against getting infected.
We're not sure at this point that the vaccine protects you against getting infected.
We know for sure it's very, very...
So hold on, then why get it? He said it. Come on, now this is leading top medical doctor standing on behalf of the nation. So-called, yes, so-called medical, stand on behalf of the nation. The nation's medical doctor saying this, leading. We're not sure at this point in time. And what do you mean you're not sure? All these people been rushing out to get the vaccine. You're not even sure if it's effective at this point in time. Why get it? Yet still, you got people breaking their necks trying to get it. I've been waiting in line forever to get the vaccine. And meanwhile, is it really effective? We don't know. Just get it. I mean, heck, rather get it than not get it, right? Let's continue. Let's go back to it. It was just funny. It was cracking me up when I was watching it, so the scene was funny.
Good. 94, 95% in protecting you against clinically recognizable disease.
Clinically recognizable disease, but not COVID?
And almost 100% in protecting you for severe disease.
And almost 100% from severe disease? Well, then what does he call COVID if that's not serious?
But until you have virus that is so low in society, we as a nation need to continue to wear the mask, to keep the physical distance, to avoid crowds. We're not through with this just because we're starting a vaccine program.
We're not through with this just because we're starting a vaccine program.
Even though you as an individual might have gotten vaccinated, it is not over by any means. We still have a long way to go, and we've got to get as many people as possible vaccinated of all groups.
What does that take? When are we fully vaccinated?
Well, the projection that I've made, and I hope it works this way, it's going to depend upon...
All right, that's enough of that. Y'all get it. That was comedy for me. Hope it was for some of y'all. I said, boy, yeah, go ahead. I said, read that again.
The book of Job 13, verse 4. But ye are forgers of
He
lies.
said, forgers of lies. Read.
Ye are all physicians of no value.
Most High hit it dead on the head more than any of us could. He said, physicians of no. What's the whole point then? Think about it. That's just bad leadership. I'm getting the whole nation, millions of people to get this, and we don't even know. It may not be effective. At least we tried. We did something. Golly. I could have did better than that. Could have said, look, naturally have everyone eat kale, spinach, salad for a week. Let's go ahead and shut down fast food places. You could have did better. More people would have got healed off of that. Changed their diet. They would have healed a gang of diseases off of that. It's just less people dying from heart attacks, kidney failure, the other diseases. Nevertheless, that was just funny. Let me go ahead and pull this back up. But that's what the Most High means, man. Physicians of no value, no help to us, really, yet and still is what are you getting paid all this money for? There's a lot of actual natural doctors that could be using that in that seat, helping a lot more people. Let's get into, I'm going to bring up a few things. We're going to get back to my PowerPoint, and I'm going to go ahead and get into this particular book. All right. Go ahead and bring this up. Just got to transition back. That was just in the spirit. I want to bring that up while I remembered it. All right, let's go to my handy-dandy portfolio. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and continue with some things left off. Let's get into, once again, some of these experiments that have been done. So this is a book, When Doctors Kill, Who, Why, and How. All right? We're going to get a few points from this book. I'm going to zoom in. We're in chapter 10, Good Old-Fashioned American Ingenuity and Evil. Never perform an experiment which might be harmful to the patient, even though it's highly advantageous to science and the health of others. French physiologist Claude Bernard. All right, so I'm going to skip through, mainly focus on the highlights. Well, before and after the Second World War, a significant number of American physicians have conducted unethical experiments on vulnerable humans, resulting in serious injuries and deaths. Get them down. Unethical medical experiments continued in civilian and military research establishments unabated for 35 years after World War II, and more sporadically into the early 2000s. Think they stopped? This was in spite of the 1945 Nuremberg Code and American legislation that forbid unethical and involuntary medical experimentation. Because guess what? Even when they made legislation to stop these things, you think Esau really listened to his own legislation? Nope. He said he kept doing it. He said, just put out a paper, Bob. Just let them know, we're not doing this stuff anymore. But anyway, so you want me to still do those? We got those, people in here for the trial. Should we continue? Yeah, send them in. What are you thinking? We're doing this for the public. Come on, Bob. We don't really follow that stuff. You got to give the masses something. This was in spite of the 1945 Nuremberg Code and American legislation that forbid unethical and involuntary medical experimentation. Involuntary? You mean these people didn't give their consent? Wow. The subjects of the unethical experimentations were mostly minorities. Wow. No wonder they're pushing so hard for us to get it. We're mostly minorities, the poor, and the disadvantaged, as well as veterans and captive populations, including members of the military, prison inmates, and institutionalized patients, both adults and children. So once again, when you're dealing with, let's get Job, chapter 9, verse 26. The Most High said the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. That's exactly what it is. You're dealing with a man that is wicked. Go ahead and get that, read that. That was page 87, of course. Yeah. 26 or 27? Yeah, earth given in the hand of the wicked. Yeah, 24.
The book of Job. Oh, yeah, the new one. Job 9 and 24. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked.
The earth is given into the hands of the wicked. All right? That's the one ruling the earth. So now, let's go ahead and let's get a few examples. This is page 88. So the following examples of unethical medical research, although not totally inclusive, are representative of the various studies performed by our own physicians and scientists, by our own being those of America. So I'm not going to get every single last one, but I'm going to go through a lot. Some of these I'm going to skip because I covered them last time, or they're just some of the more common ones that we know of. All right? So now let's go ahead and let's get, we already know, many of us already know by Dr. James Marion Sims. Okay, so most people know about that, but I'm going to skip over that for this sake, and I'm going to get page 89, Experiments on Filipino Prisoners. After the successful conquest of the Philippines in 1902, I'm going to read down. In an effort to better understand the risks facing our troops, a series of experiments were developed that led to the death of many Filipinos. U.S. Army doctors working in the Philippines withheld proper nutrition from 29 prisoners. So in order to induce beriberi, a nutritional disease due to lack of vitamin B1. 4 test subjects died. Later that year, Army physicians working on the Philippines injected 5 prisoners with plague. And in 1906, Dr. Richard P. Strong, a professor of tropical medicine at Harvard, experimented with cholera in other prisoners. The most infamous of these studies was Strong's inoculation of 24 inmates with a new live cholera vaccine that had somehow become contaminated with plague organisms. Strong had conducted inoculations in the convalescent ward, where he ordered all the prisoners there to form a line without telling them what he was going to do. All the men became sick, and 13 died. These experiments were all the more unusual in that neither cholera nor plague was prevalent in the area at that time. Skipping down, Strong was exonerated of any wrongdoing. So during the Nuremberg trials, Nazi doctors cited this study to justify their own medical experiments. So once again, that's what happens. Esau always gets off the hook. So experiments on the disadvantaged. So our government continued its work for the betterment of humanity. in other countries as well. In 1900, the famous Dr. Walter Reed injected 22 Spanish immigrant workers in Cuba with the agent for yellow fever, paying them $100. $100 in gold if they did not contract the disease, and $200 if they contracted it. Between 1932 and 1917, we already know about the Tuskegee experiment, so I'm going to go ahead and skip down. I'm going to get moving on. Page 91, paying a debt to society. 1915, Dr. Joseph Goldberger induced pellagra, a nascent deficiency that damaged the skin and the central nervous system in 12 Mississippi inmates. In 1935, the director of the U.S. Public Health Office admitted that officials had known for some time that pellagra was caused by nascent deficiency, but did nothing about it, apparently because most victims were poor African Americans. So, of course, it makes sense. Why do anything to care about their well-being? Because generally, we don't care about their well-being. The subjects in the Mississippi study were truly volunteers who were eventually treated in an attempt to restore their health, which, of course, well, nothing we can do about them now, Bob. Casualty of war, all for the name of science. So now I'm going to skip down with some of these. Now, this is from globalresearch.ca. Of course, some of these I'm skipping because I already covered them, all right? So I'm just going to get a few of them because there's a lot to cover, so I'm not going to get every single one. But we're going to get more, and you'll see, because we'll get different citations from different websites. They all kind of cover some of the same things, but others go into further detail with some of these other experiments. So now, according to congressional testimony by Dr. Alan M. Pearson, director of the Biological and Chemical Weapons Control Program at the Washington, D.C.-based Center for Arms Control and Non-Proliferation, with very little in the way of effective oversight or accountability, tens of billions of dollars have been appropriated for bioweapons-related research and development activities. Pearson revealed that approximately $1.7 billion has been appropriated for the construction on new high contamination or contaminant facilities for bioweapons-related research. By high contaminant facilities, I mean facilities that are designed for work with agents that may cause serious or potentially lethal disease through exposure to aerosols, called Biosafety Level 3 or BSL-3 facilities. So now, in facilities that are designed for work with agents that pose a high individual risk of life-threatening disease, which may be transmitted via the aerosol route or for which there is no available vaccine or therapy. Prior to 2002, there were 3 significant BSL-4 facilities in the United States. Today, 12 are in operation, under construction, or in the planning stage. Skip it down. BSL-3 labs is also clearly growing. There are at least 600 such facilities in the U.S. Chillingly, one consequence of the metastatic growth is that the very lab designed to protect against bioweapons may become a source for them. According to Edward Harmon, the director of the now-defunct Sunshine Project, Harmon relates that active programs utilizing genetic engineering techniques have been employed in offensive biowarfare programs in order to make biowarfare agents more effective. Such works have generated new risks to the public. Black security at 3 of the nation's 5 BSL-4 labs currently in operation. Unauthorized access, theft, loss, or release. They do have facilities where they do keep lethal diseases. We'll get back to more of this later on. So recently completed inventory at a major U.S. Army biodefense facility found nearly 10,000 more vials of potentially lethal pathogens than were known to be stored at the site. Skipping down, the GSM report states that while half the newfound material was destroyed after being recorded, Inventory Control Officer Sam Edwin told reporters that the other half was deemed worthy for further scientific use, cataloged, and stored in the center's containment freezers. So, of course, they continue to lie about what it is that they truly keep there and the number of it, and anything deemed useful for further use, they just simply hold on to. More pertinently, what happens when the state itself turns rogue? And under cover of national security in the endless war on terror creates the acute risk in the form of out-of-control laboratories designed to protect against bioweapons that instead have become a source for them. Skipping down. Now, some of you guys remember what I mentioned Operation Paperclip. All right. August 1945, Operation Paperclip. Program to import top Nazi scientists into the United States. So now, Linda Hurt relates in her book, Secret Agenda, that a Reach Health leader, Rechtsgesundheitsheiter, Dr. Kurt Bloom, was saved from the gallows due to American intervention. Bloom admitted he had worked on Nazi bacteriological warfare projects and had experimented on concentration camp prisoners with bubonic plague and sarin gas at Auschwitz. So after his acquittal at the 1947 Nuremberg doctors' trials, the same people responsible for the code in which they were supposed to be more ethical. Moving on, Bloom was recruited by the U.S. Army Chemical Corps and advised the Pentagon on biological warfare. Walter Paul Emil Schreiber, a Wehrmacht general who assigned doctors to experiment on concentration camp prisoners and disperse state funds for such experiments, was another paperclip recruit. In 1951, Schreiber went to work for the U.S. Air Force School of Medicine. Herbertus Stronghold, the so-called father of space medicine, discussed and carried out experiments at doctoral inmates who were tortured and killed. Traub worked for the U.S. Air Force. Erich Traub, a rabid Nazi and the former chief in Heinrich Himmler's Inselreims, the Nazi state's secret biological warfare research facility, defects to the United States. Traub was brought to the U.S. by paperclip operatives and worked at the Naval Medical Research Institute and gave operational advice to the CIA and bio warriors at Fort Detrick. So notice, once again, they being America, imports those who he knows has a great mind to further his radical ideologies, to add in to these experiments. 1951, racist experiments are carried out. U.S. Army researchers deliberately expose African Americans to the fungus Aspergillus flamigidus to discern whether they are more susceptible to infections caused by such organisms than white Europeans. Skipping down, I dealt more so with MK Ultra, so I'm gonna skip down. Now I'm gonna go to 1955. Some of us know this as Avon, Florida. Following a CIA biowarfare test in Tampa Bay, Florida, the area experienced a sharp rise in cases of whooping cough, including 12 deaths. 1956 to 1958, more racist experiments. The U.S. Army conducted live field tests on poor African-American communities in Savannah, Georgia, and Avon Park, Florida. Mosquitoes were released into neighborhoods at ground level by researchers or by helicopter. Residents were swarmed by the pests. Many developed unknown illnesses, and some even died. After the test, Army personnel posing as health workers photographed and tested the victims, then disappeared. So they get in and get out. They get what they need to get. 1971, you'll hear more about this research facility. The U.S. Department of Agriculture proclaimed that Plum Island is considered the safest in the world on virus diseases. You'll hear about Plum Island again. 1975, PIADC begins feeding live viruses to hard ticks, including the Lone Star tick, never seen outside Texas prior to 1975. Lone Star tick is a carrier of the Borrelia burgdorferi bacteria, the casual agent of Lyme disease. The first case of the illness are reported in Connecticut, directly across from the facility. Current epidemiological data conclusively demonstrate that the epicenter of all U.S. Lyme disease cases in Plum Island. Skipping down. September 1978, a PIADC news release relays the following. Foot and mouth disease has been diagnosed in cattle in a pre-experimental animal holding facility at the Plum Island Animal Disease Center. A documented outbreak has occurred. 1979. Now, some of these dates are important because you'll see cause and effect. They did an experiment in this year. A few years later, there was an outbreak. And you'll see that consistently throughout the years if you pay attention to those details. Pay attention, you may also have to go back and review some of those things, okay? But at least you'll have the information at your disposal. I'm still going to do another lesson, which would be particularly focused on eugenics, the heart of eugenics, where it came from in detail, and then things going into birth control, Margaret Sanger, Planned Parenthood, and the Negro Project, all right? I just decided to completely separate that one due to I knew I wasn't going to have enough time. So this is primarily focused on the experiments and vaccines, all right? So now, 19 79. An internal investigation of the FMD incident reveals massive, widespread failures in the containment system at PIADC. The USDA committee report recommends that Lab 101 not be considered as a safe facility in which to do work on exotic disease agents until corrective action is accomplished. 1979, despite containment failures and poor practices, USAMRID undertakes the investigation of the deadly Zagazig 501 strain of Rift Valley fever at PIADC, producing symptoms similar to aerosolized hemorrhagic fevers such as Marburg and Ebola virus. The Army inoculates, 1979 dealing with the Ebola virus. The Army inoculates sheep that should have been destroyed as a result of the FMD outbreak with an experimental Rift Valley fever vaccine. The experiments are conducted outdoors, in violation of the lab's primary directive prohibiting such work. They break their own rules all the time, don't they? During a 1977 Rift Valley outbreak in Egypt, some 200,000 people are infected and 700 others die, excruciating deaths. A survey of blood serum taken before 1977 proved that the virus was not present in Egypt prior to the epidemic. By 2000, rampant outbreaks of the disease have occurred in Saudi Arabia and Yemen, with the virus poised to unfurl its tentacles into Europe. In 1982, a federal review begun after the FMD outbreak concludes, we believe there is a potentially dangerous situation in that without an immediate massive effort to correct deficiencies, a severe accident could result. Lack of preventive maintenance and pressures by management to expedite programs have resulted in compromising safety. In 1983, 6 PIADC workers test positive for African swine fever virus. The workers are not notified of the test results, which are conducted clandestinely during routine annual physical exams. 1991, USDA privatizes PIADC. A New Jersey firm, Burns and Roy Services Corporation, low bids other competitors and is awarded the contract. In cost-cutting move, the contractor scales back on safety and security measures in place for decades. June 1991, an underground cable supplying Lab 257 shorts out, but is not replaced since there is no money left in the budget. August 1991, Hurricane Bob, a Category 3 storm similar to Hurricane Katrina, slams into Plum Island, knocking down overhead power lines that connect Lab 257. The underground cable, which was Lab 257's primary power source, has not been repaired. Freezers containing virus samples defrost. Air seals on lab doors are breached, and animal holding room vents fail. PIADC's fail-safe mechanism of air dampers to seal off the facility also failed. Melted virus samples mixed with infected animal waste on lab floors as swarms of mosquitoes fill the facility. September 1991. The USDA denies that any system failures occurred during the hurricane. Whistleblowing workers in Lab 257 at the time of the blackout are fired in further cost-cutting moves, and several subsequently developed mysterious undiagnosed diseases. So, of course, Esau's practice, kill them off. They get some sort of disease or may accidentally commit suicide and shoot themselves 5 times in the head. Things like that happen often. In 1992, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, and the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, cite PIADC with hundreds of safety violations. When OSHA returned 5 years later, none of the violations have been corrected and discover 124 new violations. July 1992, although USDA officially denies that PIADC conducts biological warfare research, 14 officials from the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Pentagon visit Plum Island. Internal documents reveal that the visit was to meet with Plum Island staff regarding biological warfare. According to Carroll, the visitors were part of the Arms Control and Disarmament Agency reviewing the dual-use capabilities of the facility. Spring 1995, Lab 257 is closed. Although scheduled to be fully decontaminated and demolished in 1996, Carroll reports, Lab 257 still stands today, rotting from weathered decay, harboring who knows what deep within. August 1999. The first 4 human cases of West Nile virus, a mosquito-borne pathogen, never diagnosed in North America or diagnosed on Long Island. Skipping down. However, by 2002, the Center for Disease Control reports all but 6 of the lower 48 states reported West Nile virus in birds, mosquitoes, animals, or human population. Skipping down. However, Jim House, a former PIDC scientist, believes that West Nile samples existed prior to 1999 on Plum Island. He told Carol there were samples there, and it wasn't answered clearly to the public. They didn't honestly tell how many samples they had, and that's when people started to get upset. When Carol filed a Freedom of Information Act request for a catalog of germs held in the Plum Island Virus Library, he was turned down on grounds of national security. Said, of course, you can't have that information. My golly, we saved that later to hit you guys somewhere down the line with some new plague we had in the lab this whole time for the past 30 years and, popularize it. September 1999, the New York Times reports that due to the growing threat of biological terrorism against America's food supply, USDA is seeking money to turn the Plum Island Animal Disease Center into a top security laboratory where some of the most dangerous diseases known to man or beast can be studied. But yet and still, many years ago, they were supposed to shut it down, even demolish it. Now they want to reopen it up, build it back. 1999, a Cold War era document is declassified, proving that in the early 1950s, USA MRID shipped 12 vials of weaponized anthrax, enough to kill 1 million people, to PIADC, to Plum Island. In 1993, Newsday revealed that previously unclassified documents demonstrated Pentagon planned to disrupt the Soviet economy by spreading diseases to kill pigs, cattle, and horses. Oh, it came down? Did I have it up? That's okay. So now, I still might get it up. Yeah, I'll bring it back up soon. Now, December 2002, the New York Times reports a 3-hour power failure at the Plum Island Animal Disease Center. They was out power for 3 hours, which we read earlier. Everything started to defrost, break down, and next thing you know, gets exposed. Bring it up again. Bam. All right, we're back up. So now, the loss of power and failure of all 3 backup generators raised fears. June 2003, President George W. Bush transfers control of PIADC to the Department of Homeland Security. Skip me down. August 2004, DHS confirmed that FMD outbreak had spread briefly in 2 previously undisclosed incidents earlier this summer. The New York Times reports a DHS spokesperson said the virus remained within the laboratory sealed biocontainment area. So, who knows which one is true? February 2005, University of Iowa researchers conduct unauthorized genetic engineering experiments with the select agent, tularemia, rabbit fever. The Sunshine Project reports that researchers mixed genes from tularemia species and introduced antibiotic-resistant characteristics into the specimens. March 2005, when a containment facility fails, workers at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill are exposed to tuberculosis when the BSL-3 fail-safe systems malfunction. A blower pushes containment air out of the work cabinet, infecting the workroom. The facility had been inspected 1 month prior to the accident by the U.S. Army. That inspection didn't go too good. Now we're up. October to November 2005. Dozens of samples thought to be harmless are received by the University of California at Berkeley. In fact, there are samples of Rocky Mountain spotted fever, a BSL-3 bioweapons agent, due to its transmission as an aerosol. The samples are handled without adequate safety precautions. However, the community is never notified of the incident. April 2006, 3 Texas A&M. You see how modern we're getting this stuff? They stop. 3 Texas A&M biodefense researchers are infected with Q fever, a biological weapons agent. Rather than reporting the incident to the CDC as required by law, Texas A&M officials cover up the accident. January 2009, DHS announces that the new National Bio and Agro Defense Facility will be built in Manhattan, Kansas. July 2009, Government Accountability Office investigators charged that DHS relied on a rush flawed study to locate the $700 million research facility for highly infectious pathogens in a tornado-prone section of Kansas. Among other concerns, the GAO cites DHS's flawed and outdated methodology. Skipping down, that DHS had conducted or commissioned a study to determine whether FMD research could be conducted safely on the U.S. mainland. Natural phenomena such as tornadoes, earthquakes, and hurricanes that could cause catastrophic damage to the NBAF and result in the release of a pathogen. The possibility that an infected mosquito vector could escape, allowing a pathogen such as Rift Valley fever virus to become permanently established in the United States. So now, of course, it gives Tom Burgut, who this is by, the researcher and activist based in the San Francisco Bay Area. In addition to publishing in Covert Action, Quarterly, and Global Research, his articles can be read in Dissident Voice, The Intelligence Daily, Pacific Free Press, and the whistleblowing website WikiLeaks. He's the editor of Police State America, U.S. Military Civil Disturbance Planning, distributed by AK Press. All right, beautiful. So we handled that. All right, so now I'm going to take a break and get to something else in particular from this one. News.psu.edu. I'm going to get a few things, and this is important. There was given such a climate, a different understanding of the notion of informed consent. In the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, Litter explains, most investigators realized that when using healthy subjects, informed consent was important. But there was no such mandate to obtain consent from people who were already sick. If you were a hospital patient in 1950, an investigator wanted to conduct an experiment on you, he would not have felt that consent was necessary. In Silverman's recollection, informed consent did not become an issue until 1966, when the U.S. Surgeon General, responding to a heavily reported case in which live cancer cells were injected into elderly patients in a Brooklyn hospital, issued a memorandum calling for the establishment of institutional review boards, or IRBs. Remember that. And House panels, which would impartially judge the ethical propriety of all clinical trials. Before IRBs, Silverman recalled, the only consent required for a clinical trial was that of a researcher's department head. The Nuremberg Code was ignored at practice. Once again, it was ignored at practice. They didn't really follow it, but at least they had the paperwork. Despite the existence of IRBs and other ethical safeguards now in place, the committee warned research abuses can still occur. As Litter explains, the concern expressed was not specifically directed toward experiments involving radiation. Skipping down. Each of which must now pass muster above and beyond an IRB through an institutional safety panel specifically designed for work involving radioactive materials. Rather, we were speaking more to research in general. Today's experimental consent forms, Litter notes, often appear to overstate the therapeutic potential of the work. Once again, overstate the therapeutic potential of the work. There's also a tendency to confuse research with treatment. Once again, they confuse research with treatment, meaning they can say they're treating you, but they're really researching on you. But they can pass it off as treatment and lead you to believe that you're being treated. And then later on say, no, it was just research. You didn't treat me for, no, we were just injecting to see what would happen. They've done that many a times, which we'll bring out later. So it's important that patients be made aware that they may not benefit individually from an experimental treatment. At the same time, risks are often not adequately explained. That's very common. It's once again from news.psu.edu. Get this last section. There's been an interesting shift in the value that society accords experimentation, the letter says. Before, it was regarded as irregular practice. Now, mistakenly, all experiments are perceived as providing great benefit. Go ahead and bring that up again. Bring that back up in a minute. So now, over the course of this century, she adds, medical experimentation has been transformed from a burden to be borne by the socially marginal to a benefit, for which people actively campaign to gain access. One of the ironies in that change is that all the protections instituted have made it more difficult for vulnerable people to get cutting-edge treatment. So in a day and age where it should be easier, they said it's only made it harder for the vulnerable to get treatment, because now everything is an experiment. And there's very little that stops these doctors from being able to get away from doing these things. All they do is find new ways to hold themselves not guilty or hold themselves not accountable for whatever it is that they end up eventually doing to you in a situation. So now, this is from Susan E. Lederer, PhD, is Associate Professor of Humanities in the College of Medicine, the Milton S. Hershey Medical Center, Pennsylvania, State University, 500 University Drive, Hershey, Pennsylvania. And, okay, there we go. That's the rest of that. Rest of it you kind of see there, but just getting the pertinent information in case anyone asks. So now, this is from NBCnews.com, the ugly past of U.S. human experiments uncovered. I'm going to skip down. All right, let's get some of these bullet points. A federally funded study began in 1942, injected experimental flu vaccine in male patients at a state insane asylum in Ypsilanti, Michigan. Then exposed them to a flu several months later. It was co-authored by Dr. Jonas Salk, who a decade later would become famous as inventor of the polio vaccine. They said, but guess what? All in the name of science. In federally funded studies in the 1940s, noted researcher Dr. W. Paul Havens Jr. exposed men to hepatitis in a series of experiments, including one using patients from mental institutions in Middletown and Norwich, Connecticut. Havens, a World Health Organization expert on viral diseases, was one of the first scientists to differentiate types of hepatitis and their causes. See, I let you know it's all good as long as we did it in the name of science. Researchers in the mid-1940s studied the transmission of deadly stomach bug by having young men swallow unfiltered stool suspension. The study was conducted at the New York State Vocational Institution, a reformatory prison. It's supposed to be a reformatory prison. It's supposed to help reform you in West Coxsackie. The point was to see how well the disease spread that way as compared to spraying the germs and having test subjects breathe it. Swallowing it was a more effective way to spread the disease. You would, duh, of course. The thing is, when the Most High said this is a base people, he says, of course, yes, you swallowing it is going to be more effective than me spraying it on you. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So now, swallowing it was a more effective way to spread the disease, the researchers concluded. The study doesn't explain that the men were rewarded for this awful task. Probably not. Not enough. A University of Minnesota study in the late 1940s injected 11 public service employee volunteers with malaria, then starved them for 5 days. Some were also subjected to hard labor, and those men lost an average of 14 pounds. They were treated for malaria fevers with quinine sulfate. One of the authors was Ansel Keys, a noted dietary scientist who developed K rations for the military and the Mediterranean diet for the public. But a search of various news archives found no mention of the study. For a study in 1957, once again, they hide certain stuff. Put that away, Bob. We don't want anyone to see that. For a study in 1957, when the Asian flu pandemic was spreading, federal researchers sprayed the virus in the noses of 23 inmates at Patuxent Prison in Jessup, MD. To compare their reaction to those of 32 virus-exposed inmates who had been given a new vaccine. Government researchers in the 1950s tried to infect about 24 volunteering prison inmates with gonorrhea using 2 different methods in an experiment at a federal penitentiary in Atlanta. The bacteria was pumped directly into the urinary tract through the penis, according to their paper. Golly. They still ain't stopped. Oh, yeah, let me get this also from NBC News. It was at about that time the prosecuted Nazi doctors in 1947 led to the Nuremberg Code, a set of international rules to protect human test subjects. Many U.S. doctors essentially ignored them, arguing that they applied to Nazi atrocities, not to American medicine. Told you they ignored it. Because once again, they say, what they were doing was extreme. What we're doing is science. Our experiments is better. But it's the same people. My back is on fire. By the early 1970s, even experiments involving prisoners were considered scandalous. In widely covered congressional hearings in 1973, pharmaceutical industry officials acknowledged they were using prisoners for testing because they were cheaper than chimpanzees. Man, do you see this? They said, look, you know how much a chimpanzee costs? See, I can get a prison inmate for half off, and I'll be all right. They come a dime a dozen. Told you we don't mean nothing to you. Told you, you hear all this that's been going on, either make you mad, make you sad, feel some type of way. Continuing on, still from NBC News, as the supply of prisoners and mental patients dried up, researchers looked to other countries. Once again, researchers looked to other countries. It made sense. Clinical trials could be done more cheaply and with fewer rules. So now you wonder why Bill Gates got himself over and they go in other countries. Cheaper! We'll get more into that later because literally I'm going to get a lot into him, especially when I cover eugenics. Like, what does he have to do? Why is he so involved? Got to research his family. He got to follow in the steps of his pappy. You know, his pappy was the senior director for Planned Parenthood. So we'll get more into those things too. So he was actually over it, and amongst many other things, you know, but nevertheless, conversation for another day. That's when we get into eugenics. So the supply of prisoners and mental patients dried up, research looked to other countries. It made sense. Clinical trials could be done more cheaply and with fewer rules. And it was easy to find patients who were taking no medication, a factor that can complicate tests of other drugs. So you guys look healthy? Come here. They look good. Give me down. Now, reading this underline, it's not that we're out infecting anybody with things, Kaplan said. You see that? They say, we're not infecting people with things, we're just injecting them. Still, in the last 15 years, two international studies sparked outrage. One was likened to Tuskegee. U.S.-funded doctors failed to give the AIDS drug AZT to all the HIV-infected pregnant women in a study in Uganda, even though it would have protected their newborns. U.S. health officials argued the study would answer questions about AZT's use in the developing world. Can you believe that? They said, well, we could have saved their babies, but it could have gotten in the way of science. We couldn't do it. All right, we understand. Continue. That's how America does it. Continue. Sorry to have interrupted your work. Not a problem. We're not that offended. Next time, please leave us alone. The other study by Pfizer Inc. That sounds very familiar. Gave an antibiotic named Trovon to children with meningitis in Nigeria, although there were doubts about its effectiveness for that disease. And Anthony Fauci again, you wonder where they get it from. There's doubts. Does it work? Heck, we don't know. I mean, it does something to them. They get something different. That's all that matters. All right, then, keep doing it. Although there are doubts about its effectiveness for that disease, critics blame the experiment for the deaths of 11 children and the disabling of scores of others. Pfizer settled a lawsuit with Nigerian officials for $75 million, but admitted no wrongdoing. Boy, when this man is the devil, he said, look, we'll pay you, but we ain't mess up. We ain't did nothing wrong. Let me get this back up. That's the devil for you. He said, look, to be honest with you, I'm giving you this money, but it's not because we messed up. It's simply because We believe we should donate to a charitable organization, and we're simply trying to do this out of the goodness of our heart. Thank God. That's how he does things. It's unrelated. Unrelated donation. Now you don't want to they be donating to charity. So we're trying to cover up our tracks. Don't tell anybody about this. Last year, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Inspector General reported that between 40 and 65% of clinical studies of federally regulated medical products were done in other countries in 2008. And that proportion probably has grown. The report also noted that U.S. regulators inspected fewer than 1% of foreign clinical trial sites. Golly, fewer than 1%. You said, what are they doing over there, Bob? I don't know. Pick somewhere to go. There's over 200 facilities. I mean, just go to one of them. And write it down on paper, say we inspected. That's it. Golly, keep it going. We got more stuff to do, more experiments, bring in more people. That's it. That's all they do, just put something down on paper. And we believe it. But somehow we trust and believe that they don't lie. Like they don't put out papers with false information. Just because it has some nice website on it don't mean it's the truth. We think because it looks fancy, it's colorful. Look at this. They say the vaccine's all right. It's good for me. It'll help me. You keep believing that if you want to. I know the history. But it's often hard to get information on international trials. Very hard because they keep it secret. And then I got, syphilis study. These issues were still being debated when, last October, the Guatemala study came to light. In the 1946 to 48 study, American scientists infected prisoners and patients in a mental hospital in Guatemala with syphilis, apparently to test whether penicillin could prevent some sexually transmitted disease. The study came up with no useful information and was hidden for decades. That's what they do, I don't know. What do you want to do today, Bob? Let's just see if this fixes this. Bring in some people. Did it fix it? Nah, it didn't work. What do we do with them? I don't know. Get rid of them. What do we do with the study? I don't know. Put it in the drawer. Who cares? On to the next one. That's what they do. The Guatemala study nauseated ethics on multiple levels. Beyond infecting patients with a terrible illness, it was clear that people in the study did not understand what was being done to them or were not able to give their consent. He loves that. He just loves it when you're ignorant. And I can just inject you with stuff. You know how many of us have been experimenting on and probably never knew it? What are you injecting me with? Oh, this is good. It'll help your vitamin A. What are you injecting me with? I don't know. It'll help your kids for chicken pox. Just take it. Just take it. You know, a lot of them studies, and I'll get to it too. You know, that's what he does. He literally, when he wants to study, like a lot of stuff be experimental. They're trained to tell you and make you believe, well, we've been doing this for a long time. Yeah, it's good and healthy. Like, that's it. Because they told you this is purely experimental, and we're just trying it on you, and we're trying it on your child. Okay? It's experimental. What are you going to do? How are you going to look at them? But if I tell you, so is this going to be fine? Have you got that? Yeah, sure. This is just common practice procedure. So we're just going to go ahead and inject you with this, and we're going to give you 2 doses. You're going to have to come back on the 3rd of next month for your 2nd dose, and we're going to have to give these to your children, okay? So this is just a sheet. You can just go ahead and sign here, all right? And this is everything that's just part of normal procedure. You feel confident. All right, you tell it to me that way. Shoot me up, Johnny. Shoot me up. Go ahead. Here's my baby. That's what we done? Have you gotten shots? How many you gotten? How many you allowed your kids to get? That's you got to ask yourself, be like, how much you been experimenting on? I'm glad both my kids ain't got none. Not a single shot, not a single pill for nothing. Nothing. Healthy. The worst thing they ever got in their life is a fever. That's it. So didn't even have to go to the hospital. Maybe that's the worst thing. Maybe throwing up, and that. Healthy kids. So now, let me see. Ooh, Human Medical Experimentation, United States. The shocking, this is the last part of this one. Then we go into the book. Human Medical Experimentation, United States, The Shocking True History of Modern Medicine and Psychiatry, 1965 to 2005. I'm going to skip MK Ultra. We covered that. It's from naturalnews.com. All right, I get this, 1967. Dioxin applied to 10 prisoners. The CIA places a chemical in the drinking water supply, the FDA headquarters. Skimming down. In a study published in the Journal of Clinical Investigation, researchers inject pregnant women with radioactive cortisol to see if the radioactive material would cross the placentas and affect the fetuses. So, glossalic. The U.S. Army pays Professor Kliegman, we've talked about him before, to apply skin blistering chemicals to Holmesburg prison inmates' faces and backs. Part of my back is burning. So reading down, Project Often, which studies the toxicology, transmission, and behavioral effects of drugs in animal and human subjects, and Project Chickwit, which gathers European and Asian drug developmental information. Researchers paralyzed 64 prison inmates in California with a neuromuscular compound called succinylcholine. 1968, Planned Parenthood of San Antonio in South Central Texas and the Southwest Foundation for Research and Education began an oral contraceptive study on 70 poverty-stricken Mexican-American women. Given only half the oral contraceptives they think they are receiving, that's once again, they think they're receiving. You don't even know what they're really giving you. So, and the other half a placebo. When the results of the study are released a few years later, it stirs tremendous controversy among Mexican-Americans. Wonder why. 1969, President Nixon ends the United States Offensive Biowarfare Program, including human experimentation done at Fort Detrick. So, but did it really stop? Nope. So, which experiments involving exposure to dangerous biological agents? U.S. military conducts DTC Test 69-12, which is an open-air test of VX and sarin nerve agents at the Army's Edgewood Arsenal in Maryland, likely exposing military personnel. Experimental drugs are tested on mentally disabled children, and bilingual, that's a word. Dr. Donald MacArthur, skipping down, requests $10 million from Congress to develop a synthetic biological agent that will be resistant to the immunological and therapeutic processes. 1970, a year after this request, under H.R. 15090, Dr. MacArthur receives funding to begin CIA-supervised mycoplasma research with Fort Detrick Special Operations Division. Didn't Nixon just say he shut that down? But they didn't. Hopefully create a synthetic immunosuppressive agent. Some experts believe that this research may have inadvertently created HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. 1971, President Nixon converts Fort Detrick from an offensive biowarfare lab to the Frederick Cancer Research and Development Center, now known as the National Cancer Institute at Frederick. In addition to cancer research, scientists study virology, immunology, and retrovirology, including HIV there. Additionally, the site is home to the U.S. Army Medical Research Institute, which researches drugs, vaccines, and countermeasures for biological warfare. As the former Fort Detrick does not move far away from its biowarfare past. Obviously not. 1971, Stanford University conducts the Stanford Prison Experiment on a group of college students. 1972, in study sponsored by U.S. Air Force, Dr. Emilio Marazzi gives LSD to mental patients at the University of Missouri Institute of Psychiatry in the University of Minnesota Hospital at study. Ego strength. 1974, so Congress enacts the National Research Act, creating the National Commission for the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research, and finally setting standards for human experimentation on children. Finally. But did they follow them? Nope. 1975. The Department of Health, Education, and Welfare give the National Institutes of Health policies for the protection of human subjects. 1966 regulatory status, Title 45, known as the Common Rule, officially creates institutional review boards, IRBs, which of course they just really ignore. 1977, the National Urban League holds its national conference on human experimentation, stating, "We don't want to kill science, but we don't want science to kill, mangle, and abuse us." Sharab. 1978, the CDC begins experimental hepatitis B vaccine trials in New York. This is an important term. It's asked for research subjects, specifically asked for promiscuous homosexual men. Professor Wolf Schumans of the Columbia University School of Public Health had made the vaccine's infective serum from the pooled blood serum of hepatitis-infected homosexuals, and then developed it in chimpanzees, the only animal susceptible to hepatitis B, leading to the theory that HIV originated in chimpanzees before being transferred over to humans via this vaccine. So it's not that it was a situation where it originated in chimpanzees. They just pulled blood serum of hepatitis-infected homosexuals and then developed it in chimpanzees. 1979, the National Convention for the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research releases the Belmont Report, which establishes the foundations for research experimentation on humans. It's like every other year they get something that's supposed to establish ethical experiments, which they don't ever follow. The Belmont Report mandates that researchers follow these three basic principles: respect the subjects as autonomous persons and protect those with limited ability for independence, such as children. 2, do no harm. 3, choose test subjects justly, being sure not to target certain groups because they are easily accessible or easily manipulated, rather than for reasons directly related to the test's burden. Now, how many of those rules did they break that they made? All of them, exactly, sis. 1980, a study reveals a high incidence of leukemia among the 18,000 military personnel who participated in 1957 Operation Plum Bomb. According to blood samples tested years later for HIV, 20% of all New York homosexual men who participated in the 1978 hepatitis B vaccine experiment are HIV positive by this point. Keep up with that, because it only gets worse with time. Everything gets worse with time. Still on the same point, 1980, American doctors give experimental hormone shots to hundreds of Haitian men confined to detention camps in Miami and Puerto Rico, causing the men to develop a condition known as gynecomastia, in which men develop full-sized breasts. The CDC continues its 1978 hepatitis B vaccine experiment in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, St. Louis, and Denver. They said, we're expanding from San Fran. New horizons, Bob, new horizons. Recruiting over 7,000 homosexual men in San Francisco alone. The FDA prohibits the use of prison inmates in pharmaceutical drug trials, leading to the advent of the experimental drug testing centers industry. The first AIDS case appears in San Francisco that same year. Wonder why? But all these are connected. Once again, connect the dots. 1981, 1993. The Seattle-based Genetic Systems Corporation begins an ongoing medical experiment called Protocol Number 126, in which cancer patients at the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center in Seattle are given bone marrow transplants that contain 8 experimental proteins made by Genetic Systems. Rather than standard bone marrow transplants, 19 human subjects die from complications directly related to the experimental treatment. A deep diving experiment at Duke University causes test subjects Leonard Whitlock to suffer permanent brain damage. The CDC acknowledges that a disease known as AIDS exists and confirms 26 cases of the disease, all in previously healthy homosexuals living in New York, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. Again, supporting the speculation that AIDS originated from the hepatitis B experiments from 1978 and 1980. But of course, leave it to Esau, well, it wasn't us. It was just something that happened. It was the monkeys. 1982, 30% of the test subjects used in the CDC's hepatitis B vaccine experiment are HIV positive by this point. Let's continue on. Let's get this. Ash, will you read it for me?
1984 FBC, Phase 1 Research Clinic founded in Miami, Florida, By 2005, it will become the largest experimental drug testing center in North America, with centers in Miami and Montreal, running phase 1 to phase, what's that? 4, Salakia. Clinical trials, drugdevelopmenttechnology.com. 1985. A former U.S. Army sergeant tries to sue the Army for using drugs on him in without his consent or even his knowledge. In the United States, Stanley 483 U.S. 669, Justice Antonin Scalia writes, the decision clearing the U.S. military from any liability in past, present, or future medical experiments without informed consent. 1987, Philadelphia resident Doris Jackson discovers.
You know, it's crazy. They try to make sure they clear from it said, clearing the U.S. military from any liability in past, present, or future medical experiments without informed consent. They want to make sure they are clear. You know what? Ain't going to be able to sue us again. We'll make sure of that. So that next time, hey, it's on you, buddy. Should have read the fine print. Read on.
1987. Philadelphia resident Doris Jackson discovers get my phone.
Sorry about that. 1987 now. So, 1987, Philadelphia resident Doris Jackson discovered that researchers have removed her son's brain post-mortem for medical study. Post-mortem for medical study. So she later learns that the state of Pennsylvania has a doctrine of implied consent, meaning that unless a patient signs a document stating otherwise, consent for organ removal is automatically implied. I thought you wouldn't have a problem with it. It's for science. You should be agreed. I'm doing society a favor. I'm helping your future children, your grandchildren. That's the way Esau says it. I'm doing you a good thing. All right, let's continue. 1988. You read that? It's not up. Oh. Will you pull it up, my brother? Go ahead.
1988. The U.S. Justice Department pays 9 Canadian survivors of the CIA and Dr. Cameron's physics driving experiments, 1957 through 1964, $750,000 in out-of-court settlements to avoid any further investigations into MK Ultra. 1988 to 2001. The New York City Administration for Children's Services begins allowing foster care children living in about 24 children's homes to be used in National Institutes of Health sponsor NIH experimental AIDS drug trials.
See that? They said, begins allowing foster care children living in about 24 children's homes to be used in National Institutes of Health sponsored experimental AIDS drug trials. Once again, didn't they say supposed to honor some things about those who are at risk, disadvantaged? Said they the number ones they be using. 1990. Let's get that. So 1990. So the United States sends 1.7 million members of the armed forces, 22% of whom are African American, to the Persian Gulf for the Gulf War, Desert Storm. More than 400,000 of these soldiers are ordered to take an experimental nerve agent medication called pyridostigmine, which is later believed to be the cause of Gulf War syndrome. Symptoms ranging from skin disorders, neurological disorders, incontinence, uncontrollable drooling, and vision problems affecting Gulf War veterans. See that? All I want to say is that they don't really care about us. The CDC and Kaiser Pharmaceuticals of Southern California, inject 1,500 six-month-old Black and Hispanic babies in Los Angeles with an experimental measles vaccine that had never been licensed for use in the United States. Never before. They said they got you. Adding to the risk, children less than a year old may not have an adequate amount of myelin around their nerves, possibly resulting in impaired neurodevelopment because of the vaccine. Let me bring that up. The CDC later admits that parents were never informed that the vaccine being injected into their children was experimental. The FDA allows the U.S. Department of Defense to waive the Nuremberg Code and use unapproved drugs and vaccines in Operation Desert Shield. See that? They go ahead. We know we put this here, but we're just going to sign a waiver. We'll be all right. Just ignore it. Keep going. Moving down, 1992. Columbia University, New York State Psychiatric Institute, and the Mount Sinai School of Medicine gives 100 males, mostly African-American and Hispanic. It's always mostly African-American and Hispanic, ain't it? All between the ages of 6 and 10. All the younger brothers of juvenile delinquents, 10 milligrams of fenfluramine, fen, per kilogram of body weight in order to test the theory that low serotonin levels are linked to violent or aggressive behavior. Parents of the participants received $125 each, including a $25 Toys R Us gift certificate. See? We helped them out. Go ahead, sis. Yeah. Oh, may you pass it the mic? Oh, I'm so sorry. They can't hear online. Right there, you got it. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Let me get the scripture right quick.
Restate that. Go ahead, yeah, get it.
The book of Hebrews 12, verse 16. Lest there be any fornicator or profane person as Esau. As you can see, time after time. And it hasn't stopped. You know, when you read about what happened when Jacob died, he was doing the same thing. Brother came through and you started what? The 1800s? At this particular class. But we know everything else that they've done ever since, like I said, ever since Jacob passed away. You know, and in the book of Micah, it also talks about, you know, woe unto those individuals that think about wicked things to do, and in the morning, they go ahead and execute it because the power is in their hand. Who else is doing these type of experiments? Always Esau. Like the brother said, it seems like every year they act like they're going to save somebody. They're going to produce something to help humanity and forget about the last project in which all they did was endanger who? Blacks and Hispanics. That's what the scripture's right on point. Always.
I've been looking for another scripture, but it deals with that, man, Esau counts our lives a pastime. Like, he just counts our lives a pastime. Like, we're just here for his amusement and entertainment and his use. You know, the scriptures deal with that. You know, we don't really serve. He just, you know, counts us as just like, all right, like, it's no different for him, like with us, it's no different than him having like a ant farm. It's just, oh, look at him. I squished one. That's just what it is. You know, all right, there's plenty more there. Squish another one. That's all we are to him.
Well, that's when you look at profane, it says to treat something sacred. Yasharala is sacred, right? We're set apart. We're the Most High's chosen people. So it says to treat something sacred with abuse, irreverence, or contempt. To debase by a wrong, unworthy, or vulgar use. And that's exactly what the scripture's saying. Like, you know, these are just blacks and Hispanics. There's plenty of them.
Cattle.
Nuts. 12 and 16.
1993, research at the West Haven VA in Connecticut give 27 schizophrenies, 12 inpatients, and 15 functioning volunteers a chemical called MCPP that significantly increases their psychotic symptoms and, as researchers note, negatively affect the test subjects on a long-term basis. He said, look at this. They over here trying to get better because we're going to give you something to make you worse. 1994, in a double-blind experiment at New York VA Hospital, researchers take 23 schizophrenic inpatients off of their medications for a meeting of 30 days. They then give 17 of them 0.5 milligrams of amphetamine and 6 a placebo as a control. Following up with PET scans at Brookhaven Laboratories, according to the researchers, The purpose of the experiment was to specifically evaluate metabolic effects in subjects with varying degrees of amphetamine-induced psychotic exacerbation. Albuquerque Tribune reporter Eileen Wilson receives a Pulitzer Prize for her investigative reporting into Cole Warren's plutonium experiments on patients at Strong Memorial Hospital in 1945. In a federally funded experiment at New York VA Medical Center, researchers give schizophrenic veterans amphetamine, even though central nervous system stimulants worsen psychotic symptoms in 40% of schizophrenics. So knowing that for most it makes it worse, but we still gonna give it to you anyway because we want to see what happens. So fella, oh yeah, gotcha. We want to see what happens, so we're still gonna give it to you anyway because, well, it's science. That's the only way we know it works, and of course, that's their reason for doing everything that they do. It's all in the name of science. As long as it helps make something better later, then it's worth all the problems it may cause now. Plus, besides, you're helping future generations. Now, researchers at Bronx VA Medical Center recruit 28 schizophrenic veterans who are functioning in society and give them L-Dopa in order to deliberately induce psychotic relapse. Can you believe that? You just got good, you all better, but we want to deliberately cause you to relapse. Just to see how it goes. Let me now read the 1995 Claudia Moulton's testimony that Dr. Sidney Godebert of MK Ultra fame used chemicals, radiation, hypnosis, drugs, isolation, and tubes of water, sleep deprivation, electric shock, brainwashing, and emotional, sexual, and verbal abuse as part of a mind control experiments that had the ultimate objective of turning her, who was only a child at the time, into the perfect spy. Man, it is a movie. You know how he get down. Movies come from somewhere. In Dr. Daniel P. Van Kamen's study, The Behavior versus Biochemical Prediction of Clinical Stability Following Haloperidol Withdrawal in Schizophrenia, researchers recruit 88 veterans who are stabilized by their medications enough to make them functional in society and hospitalize them for 8 to 10 weeks. During this time, the researchers stopped giving the veterans the medications that are enabling them to live in society, placing them back on a 2 to 4 week regimen of the standard dose of Haldol. Then the veterans are washed out, given lumbar punctures, and put under 6-week observation to see who would relapse and suffer symptomatic schizophrenia once again. 50% do. Golly, he doesn't stop, does he? That's why the Most High says that even the nations know that when it comes down to Esau, that's the border of wickedness. That's the border. That's the edge. That's where they know. Other nations know, that's when you want to know how far wickedness go. Look at them people. 1996. This type of research is ongoing nationwide in medical centers and VA hospitals. The Department of Defense admits that Gulf War soldiers were exposed to chemical agents. However, 33% of all military personnel afflicted with Gulf War syndrome never left the United States during the war. 1997. In order to expose unethical medical experiments that provoke psychotic relapse in schizophrenic patients, the Boston Globe publishes a 4-part series entitled Doing Harm, Research on the Mentally Ill. Researchers give 26 veterans at a VA hospital a chemical called yohimbine to purposely induce post-traumatic stress disorder. Golly, the VA is supposed to be helping veterans. They're over there doing all the experiments on them. An experiment sponsored by the U.S. government researched to withhold medical treatment from HIV-positive African-American pregnant women, giving them a placebo rather than AIDS medication. In 1997. Researchers give amphetamine to 13 schizophrenic patients in a repetition of the 1994 amphetamine challenge at New York VA Hospital. As a result, the patients experienced psychosis, delusions, and hallucinations. The researchers claim to have informed consent. On September 18th, victims of unethical medical experiments at major U.S. research centers, including the National Institutes of Mental Health, NIMH, testified before the National Bioethics Advisory Committee. 1999. Skipping down. I can read it. Adele E. Shampoo, PhD, testifies on the unethical use of human beings in high-risk research experiments before the U.S. House of Representatives House Committee on Veterans Affairs, alerting the House on the use of American veterans in VA hospitals as human guinea pigs and calling for national reforms. Doctors at the University of Pennsylvania injected 18-year-old Jesse Gelsinger with an experimental gene therapy as part of an FDA-approved clinical trial. He dies 4 days later, and his father suspects that he was not fully informed of the experiment's risk. They never are. 2000, the Department of Defense begins declassifying the records of Project 112, including SHAD, and locating and assisting the veterans who were exposed to live toxins and chemical agents as part of Project 112. Skipping down, the U.S. Air Force and rocket maker Lockheed Martin sponsored Loma Linda University study that pays 100 Californians $1,000 to eat a dose of percolate, a toxic component of rocket fuel that causes cancer, damages the thyroid gland, and hinders normal development in children and fetuses every day for 6 months. I notice to see when they get to paying you for stuff, you already know it's a problem with it. Here they want to give you weed and $1,000 and all this other thing to take the vaccine. You already know there's something wrong with it. Loma Linda study is the first large-scale study to use human subjects to test the harmful effects of a water pollutant and is inherently unethical. 2001, during a tobacco industry-financed Alzheimer's experiment at Case Western University in Cleveland, Eileen Holden Elb dies after she drinks a glass of orange juice containing a dissolved dietary supplement. Radiologist Scott Sear of Pennsylvania dies from kidney failure, severe anemia, and possibly lupus, all caused by blood pressure drugs he was taking as part of a 5-year clinical trial. Skipping down, your father apparently was not told about the risk of hydrolyzed-induced lupus. Yep, last page, and the rest I'll just briefly show for the sources. 2002. President George W. Bush signed the Best Pharmaceuticals for Children Act, BPCA, offering pharmaceutical companies 6-month exclusivity in exchange for running clinical drug trials on children. Can you believe that? This will, of course, increase the number of children used as human test subjects. So, of course, President, he said, look, let's make sure we can use children. That's where a lot of the good information is. They're young, they're strong. So much ahead of them, we can look at them for so many years to come. He made it more possible to experiment on children. 2-year-old Michael Dario of Delaware dies of congestive heart failure. After death, his parents learned that doctors had performed an experimental surgery on him when he was 5 months old. It was an experimental surgery. 2004, in his BBC documentary, Guinea Pig Kids, and BBC News article of the same name, reporter Jamie Doran reveals that children involved in the New York City foster care system were unwitting human subjects on experimental AIDS drug trials from 1988 to, in his belief, present times, up until 2004, at least at that time. 2005, in response to the BBC documentary and article Guinea Pig Kids, the New York City Administration of Children's Services, ACS, sends out an April 22nd press release admitting that foster care children were used in experimental AIDS drug trials, but said that the last trial took place in 2001, and thus the trials are not continuing. How many times you heard them say that? Well, we did the last one. Yes, we know. We started in 1988, but we stopped in 2001. Tell him, Bob, where's the paper? Get out the drawer. In exchange for receiving $2 million from the American Chemical Society, the EPA proposes the Children's Health Environmental Exposure Research Study, CHEERS, to learn how children, ranging from infancy to 3 years old, ingest, inhale, and absorb chemicals by exposing children from a poor, predominantly black area of Duval County, Florida, to these toxins. Due to pressure from activist groups, negative media coverage, and two Democratic senators, the EPA eventually decided to drop the study on April 8th, 2005. Woo! A lot of experiments, huh? All right, these are all the works cited. So I'll just kind of briefly scroll down here. Of course, it's online, so you can go ahead, look back into it. But that's it from that one. Boy, there was a lot. This is the next page, second page. It's all my bad. Fix that real quick. Exit. So now, how many guys learned about some new experiments? So everybody, huh? Says something was going on there I didn't know about. And yet and still, once again, answer the question, do you believe that your enemy has your best interests at heart with these vaccines? So when we say, as other brothers would say that, may teach, do not take these vaccines. By no means are they safe, are they healthy, are they good for you. And these are the last of these sources that I'm about to finish last up with this book, Vaccine Guide by Dr. Randall Newton-Steiner. All right? Go ahead, I'm going to stop mirroring here, put it back on the class. We're done with that. So you guys can go ahead, view that information. There's more there. Excuse me. There's more there that you can go through. Now, this book, The Vaccine Guide by Dr. Randall Newton-Steiner, it lists vaccine facts. Compulsory vaccination laws exist in every state. All vaccines carry risk of adverse reactions. Every parent has the legal right to exempt children from vaccination. The vaccination campaign has traded infectious diseases of childhood for chronic autoimmune diseases that afflict both children and adults. Because that was the thing. I mean, you're not going to ever get rid and eradicate disease, but Esau just chose to, instead of just, all right, you're growing up and maybe you got chicken pox. Let's just trade that, and now your child suffers from all these other illnesses now that are just caused through the vaccines. Like, I would have just rather chosen with the chicken pox, or rather just having other things. At least I know that'll go away. Now my children is suffering from all sorts of autoimmune diseases that them mugs ain't going away. It's stuck. All right, so I'm going to get this. And so this is the preface to the new edition. The vaccine guide now includes issues that relate to vaccination of adults as well as children. Reports of new conditions associated with the vaccine reactions and these drugs that supposedly protect our population from deadly illness have been shown in recent years to wreak their own brand of havoc. The damage that vaccines cause on immune functions is now undeniable. Skimming down. Where vaccine reactions are ignored and dismissed, though. Since 1986, drug companies have enjoyed immunity from liability for children's vaccine reactions. Now reading down, the tragic deaths caused by the rotavirus vaccine for diarrhea in children serve as a reminder of the dangers inherent in this vaccine industry process. All right. Now, next page of the preface. Within 6 months of being approved and recommended for all children, the rotavirus vaccine was withdrawn. Most parents are surprised to learn that they have a choice about vaccination. Usually, pediatricians do not give parents any information about potential adverse reactions. In recent memory, President Ford energetically supported the swine flu vaccine catastrophe. President Carter sponsored an immunization campaign that increased Congress's allocated funding from $7 million to $47 million within the first 2 years after his election. President Reagan passed the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986 to ensure adequate vaccine production. And President Clinton passed the Comprehensive Child Immunization Act of 1993. Unfortunately, complete information about vaccines is not generally available. Parents feel poorly informed. Like most decisions about health care, the choice of which vaccines to give, the timing of vaccines, and their child's safety rests in the hands of the doctor. But doctors receive recommendations from vaccine advisory committees. And the committees rely upon studies conducted by drug manufacturers. So, of course, it's all an internal loop. It is made to be in the best interest of the pharmaceutical companies and these vaccine companies, because they're the ones that are giving the doctors information and training them. So, of course, you're not going to find very much homeopathic remedies, or let alone remedies that are more aligned with naturopathy. You're not going to find, or herbalist options, because once again, that's not what the pharmaceutical and vaccine companies are looking into. So now, this book is intended to help parents investigate the subject of vaccination and to guide readers to an informed choice about each vaccine. The vaccine guide provides consumers with information about the diseases, the vaccines, their risks, and their benefits. Parents especially need to know the issues and the controversies surrounding these drugs, since the potential adverse effects of vaccines are usually cloaked in secrecy. Medical professionals have often stated the broadcasting adverse effects of vaccines to the public would cause unnecessary concern and hinder vaccine campaigns. Dr. Paul Meir summarized this concern in this position quite clearly in a panel discussion on the efficacy of the polio vaccine campaign in the 1950s. It is hard to convince the public that something is good. Consequently, the best way to push forward a new program is to decide on what you think the best decision is and not question it thereafter. And further, and not to raise questions before the public or expose the public to open discussion of the issues. Intensive Immunization Programs Hearings, 1962. Chief Medical Officer of England's Department of Health wrote, "It would be most unfortunate if the publication of this controversial work led to public anxiety over the safety of measles vaccine." Howman, 1995. This book seeks to provide information that is usually unavailable to parents. The vaccine guide also plays the issues surrounding vaccines within the context of a healthcare philosophy. Natural medical care and alternative medicine support the body's own healing mechanisms, and the result is a stronger, more resilient immune system. But of course, that's not what they want. So part 1, choices, childhood vaccines, page 3. There's a reassuring and convincing argument. Risk, a few cases of rare adverse effects to eliminate these serious life-threatening diseases. Measles, mumps, and chickenpox were simple childhood diseases. Well, all the excitement about them now. Get them down. Circumcision, vaccination, these are weighty issues with permanent effects. Get them down, page 5. 4 steps are necessary for parents who want to make an informed decision. 1, understand the philosophical issues surrounding vaccines. 2, get information about the vaccines. 3, decide which vaccines you do or don't want. 4, if you decide to vaccinate, then choose the right time. Page 6, adult vaccines. Childhood vaccination has resulted in a shift of some formerly childhood diseases to the adult population. The percentage of adults who contract whooping cough, measles, and mumps compared to children has increased. The protective effect of childhood vaccines decreases over time. And eventually, after 10 to 20 years, adults become susceptible once again to these infectious diseases. Get me down still on page 6. Hepatitis B is primarily a sexually transmitted disease, and adults with multiple sexual partners are encouraged to have the vaccine, since hepatitis B is also transmitted by exposure to the blood of infected patients. Hepatitis vaccination is required for healthcare workers. Hepatitis A is a disease contracted by drinking contaminated water, and the vaccine is encouraged for people in areas where the disease is an endemic. However, but when looking at it and as he deals with for children, it's really unnecessary. That's where his argument is. Some of the most dramatic and debilitating reactions to vaccines have occurred in adults following the hepatitis, flu, and rubella vaccines. Philosophical medical care, page 7. This leads to the concept of chemical warfare conducted against the kingdom of disease, because that's what happened. They have to feel like they have to rid the world of all disease. So the war becomes one on disease. Page 8, the freedom to choose is suspended in an all-out effort to eradicate an enemy. This is the mentality of war. The problem of warfare lies in its basically destructive principles. The casualties are usually heavy. In the vaccine war, the casualties have been devastatingly damaged children with resultant lifelong retardation, asthma, autism, and fatalities directly caused by the vaccines. The Vaccine Injury Act was instituted not because the vaccine industry admitted its culpability in these tragedies, but simply because the drug companies refused to continue production of these substances that resulted in multi-million-dollar lawsuits. The government chose to subsidize vaccine production by paying awards out of tax dollars and limiting the amount to an administrative budget. Litigation against drug companies was eliminated, and parents were left seeking recompense from a government bureaucracy. The protection of the drug companies ensured continuing profits. Vaccine production was reestablished. Parents' claims were deflected and continued to be denied, and no further recourse was left to the victims. The war against disease could continue unabated. Skipping down to the last paragraph in page 8. The same companies that make and sell these drugs fund their research. So, of course, it's all one-sided. Well, the clinical study says the vaccine is safe. Well, of course, it's by the people who made the vaccine. So, of course, they're going to say it's safe. Conflict of interest. Page 10. Drugs have the potential to cause a significant degree of imbalance because of their inherent toxicity. Page 11. The principle that a similar acute illness can cure a chronic disease was elucidated during the early 19th century by Samuel Hahnemann, the founder of the homeopathic medicine. Hahnemann showed that such an acute infectious disease often cures a chronic problem. Two diseases different in nature but very similar in their manifestations and effects, their respective suffering and symptoms always and infallibly destroy each other as soon as they meet in the organism. Smallpox has removed and cured a host of ills that have similar symptoms. When measles meets a disease that is similar to it in its main symptom, the eruption, it will uninevitably destroy and cure it. That's what you get in World War Z. That's what they did. World War Z, when they noticed that people who were sick with one thing, they said, you know what? Why aren't these people who are sick, why ain't, the zombies attacking them? Because, well, the disease recognizes that they have a disease, so we don't attack them. We attack what's healthy. So, okay, we'll inject them with whatever similar disease or different disease, then that way, leave them alone. It's like ghost mode. That's pretty much what it's explaining. All right, that's just an example. All right, so that's just a type of homeopathic medicine that can be used. Use a small dose, smallest dose possible, of some sort of disease or sickness that is similar to the sickness or disease that one may have, and it'll, in short, cancel the other one out. Then now restore you to health. So let's just say I have whooping cough. Then I can probably inject you. This is just an example, not saying this is true. Inject you what I know to be a small dose of the common cold to cure your whooping cough. That's what one side of homeopathic remedies looks at. Small doses, the smallest dose possible of something similar to the disease or sickness that you have to cancel that particular disease out to restore your health. Your body will naturally fight off that disease, restore itself, and then you'll be good. So that's one side of it. So now, the issue of long-term detrimental effects of vaccines never arises in these study designs because that concept defies the objectives of those tests. Politically, it would not be useful to look for these effects because studies are conducted by vaccine manufacturers and the government. So they don't really look at long-term. Everything is made to look at the short-term. Page 12. Both of whom have a vested interest in the product and a long-term political and monetary commitment to the promotion of the vaccine campaign. They have no interest in revealing vaccine toxicity. For example, repressed anger can result in physical changes within the body, causing high blood pressure or a depressed immune system and consequent cancer growth. Vaccine critics have postulated that the constant stress caused by manipulating and altering the immune system with vaccines could also result in these types of imbalances and disease processes. Page 13. This interest stems from the widespread rise in immune system disorders and in new diseases that never existed prior to the modern chemical era of industrial pollution and drugs, such as AIDS, cancer, lupus, chronic fatigue syndrome, hypothyroidism, and a whole array of autoimmune disorders. Many healthcare providers and consumer advocacies have pointed to vaccines as a cause of immune failure. The coincidence emerges or emergence of these diseases and the mass vaccination of populations has led to suspicions that an entire generation has suffered immune system crippling from the vaccines that should be protecting us from illness. So now everything that we're getting, we're looking and seeing that, well, it's because of the vaccines, which the medical industry isn't going to admit because, well, doctors help people. We don't hurt people. We're all here to help. And that's one of the biggest problems. Doctors have a problem with looking and saying, I call this, I hurt this person. I created something negative or an imbalance within the body. The vaccines may also impact other body systems. The nervous system seems to be particularly sensitive to the toxic properties of vaccines. Page 14. Doctors are trained by drug companies, both in medical schools and later in their offices and clinics. Medical textbooks teach drug prescribing. Clinical training involves learning the proper way to prescribe drugs. And seminars for doctors in practice teach the latest advances in drug development. All this information is derived from research conducted by the pharmaceutical industry, whose only goal is to sell drugs. So once again, that's why you don't see most doctors prescribing herbs, prescribing better things than diet, because that's not what they're trained to do. If the doctors do that, those are things that they learned on their own, that they studied on their own most of the time, not things that they were taught within their institutions or within schools, because that's not the route. That's not what's pushed. Therefore, that's one of the biggest reasons why many conventional methodologies of medicine and pharmaceuticals aren't very helpful. Help you in one area, hurt you in another area, which overall is slowly still killing you. So you want to die now, you want to die later. You want to have problems now, have problems later. Well, I'll choose problems later. And many of us fall victim because, we're ignorant. We're removed from the knowledge and understanding of letting our food be our medicine, as others have said, and other notable herbologists and natural, doctors such as, Dr. Saban and others, within the community who are trying to get a voice, but of course are kept down due to major industries that make sure that those people are more so silenced, deemed crazy. They don't know what they're talking about, can't cure disease. Only way you cure disease is through our pharmaceuticals and our medicines. Page 15. Adults are required to obtain vaccine for themselves in the following situations: for attendance at a college or university, to work in the healthcare industry, for immigration, to join the armed services, and for international travel. Of course, there's a few other ones. But things to consider on page 16. Some children will inevitably be sacrificed to achieve certain goals for the community. Are you prepared to take that risk with your child? In answering that question, consider whether you agree with the philosophy that underlies the methods. Is it necessary or even wise to wipe out diseases, to prevent the body's management of childhood illnesses, to manipulate the immune system beginning at birth with toxic chemicals? What is the risk from these diseases? What are the dangers of vaccines? Now, this is page 17 that deals with what drives the vaccine campaign. Now, considering the range of organizations and forces involved in this field, a multitude of motives emerges that drive the vaccine campaign. First and foremost is modern medicine. The medical world has very little to offer in the treatment of infectious disease. I say again, the medical world has very little to offer in the treatment of infectious disease. This impotence in the face of illness leads to a strong desire to prevent these untreatable problems. Told you, most things Esau can't treat, which in this case means cure. So he looks to now, well, let's just do more preventative, but not through eating right, not through herbs, through conventional medicines. Leads to a strong desire to prevent these untreatable problems, even at a high cost in the form of adverse effects. Viruses and whooping cough are not responsive to antibiotics. That covers measles, mumps, rubella, polio, chickenpox, hepatitis, and pertussis. But more and more bacteria have become resistant to antibiotics. That threatens the effectiveness of the few drugs that treat the remaining microbes in question: Haemophilus, diphtheria, and tetanus. The ineffectiveness of allopathic medicine creates a compelling desire to develop vaccines, which shifts the research arm of the industry into hyperdrive. The fact that other forms of treatment could be utilized to manage infectious diseases is ignored. Allopathic medicine denies the effectiveness of any treatment besides its own drugs. The model does not allow for recognition of other healing systems. So now that's why all these systems do not push other forms of health and medicine. They do not support them or always say, it's not proven. Research hasn't really shown that. They'll say, and they might lead to a little bit, some people may say, ginger may help with this, but studies are inconclusive. But we're not sure because they don't push for anything because it's not in their best interest. Doesn't make them money. Page 18, the university accepted credo that the benefits derived from the vaccines outweigh their risks fuels the research, adoption, and dissemination of vaccines despite any evidence that they may be harmful. In this great battle, we lose lives to vaccine injuries. The medical world first blinds itself to the possibility of treating these illnesses with anything beyond its own meager methods, then justifies its use of toxic drugs to wipe out the offenders. The vaccine producers have one goal: profits. They will produce a vaccine for anything if they are guaranteed a market, especially if they are protected from lawsuits. They are not motivated by improving world health. So, of course, they're all in it for the money. If it don't make money, it don't make sense. Why do it? Because that's the whole thing. If I have a healthy patient, that means no money. And we don't get to experiment on nobody. I don't get to practice. Got to have some sick people to practice on, or at least make you believe that you're sick. My stomach hurts. You need surgery right away. That's what they do. So now 19, the vaccine business also provides jobs for physicians. Positions for vaccine experts occur in the form of pharmaceutical researchers, academic researchers, and membership on professional organization and government committees. This medical wing of the vaccine industry supports itself through promotion of vaccines. Their promotion of vaccines ensures self-employment, continuation of research funds, and academic positions. The only reason why they're a professor is because they got the vaccines going. We need more clinical research. We need more funding. Sign it. Conflict of interest abounds in the vaccine business. It starts with a government committee. The Center for Disease Control appoints members to the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, ACIP, which makes recommendations to the FDA. These recommendations are tremendously influential because state legislators rely on them to draft immunization requirements for their citizens. Members of the advisory committee are often employed by or funded by vaccine manufacturers. All right, and this one I like. Doctors are paid to lie. Page 20 and page 21. The recommendation approval process for vaccines takes place in a closed club with few checks on the members. No wonder more and more vaccines are rushed to market. Those scientists and physicians who dare to question the sacrosanct act of vaccination risk their careers and livelihood. When Dr. Andrew Wakefield persisted in defending his research findings on the link between autism and vaccines, he was fired from his position at the Royal Free Hospital of London, where he had conducted his clinical studies. When Dr. John Martin persisted in investigating the transmission of dangerous stealth viruses from monkeys to humans through vaccines, funding for his research dried up. In 1990, Marie Griffin and her associates at Vanderbilt University School of Medicine in Nashville, Tennessee, published a study on the risk of seizures and other neurologic events followed by the DTP, diphtheria to tetanus pertussis vaccine. The study appeared in the Journal of the American Medical Association. The study was big in scope, including more than 38,000 children who received 107,000 doses of DTP. Their conclusion? No child who was previously normal without a prior history of seizures had a seizure in the 0 to 3 days following vaccination that marked the onset of either epilepsy or other neurological or developmental abnormality. This seems to provide the final word about the supposed neurotoxicity of the pertussis vaccine and brain damage. Accompanying the article, an editorial titled Pertussis Vaccine Encephalopathy, it is time to recognize it is a myth that it is, by James Cherry, proclaimed the end of the long debut Debate about pertussis vaccine and nervous system damage, Cherry 1990. Later that year, Vincent Floganoni published another editorial titled The Pertussis Vaccine Myth Dies in another AMA-sponsored journal. Several problems, however, taint the purity of these clinical studies and their interpretation. First, Marie Griffin was reported to be financially supported by Burroughs Wellcome, one of the world's largest pertussis whooping cough vaccine manufacturers. James Cherry, MD of UCLA, was a paid consultant for Lederle Laboratories, the largest American manufacturer of pertussis vaccine, Conflict 1990. Cherry was paid by the vaccine production companies and also headed the 1988 American Academy of Pediatrics Task Force on pertussis and pertussis immunization, whose report also denied any major problems with the vaccine. In 1988, Cherry admitted receiving $50,000 per year for testifying in lawsuits on behalf of vaccine manufacturers in vaccine damage cases. So now, here you're reading doctors are paid to lie, and they're paid to cover on behalf of vaccine manufacturers. Tell them it doesn't cause these problems. How much are you paying? We'll give you $65,000. All right, done. I'll do it. The vaccine is safe. All clinical trials prove this is efficient. I'm a medical doctor, and I approve this message. That's what they do. And it works. That's what Cherry admitted. So now, and let me give my last closing remarks. So now, a significant association between the vaccine and serious neurological disorders. Oh, and that's where James Cherry also headed a task force of pediatricians that dismissed the findings of a British study that did show a significant association between the vaccine and serious neurologic disorders. Because some of these people join other committees, and of course, they have to continue. Nope, it's false. Even other studies that support, well, no, we're finding trials here. What do you say, doctor? What are your findings? Nope, I don't believe such things exist. Your trials are probably wrong. I say you probably need to do some more experimentating, some more trials, and maybe, your studies are flawed. Because they know they're getting paid under the table to make sure they keep everything hush on any sort of problem. They found in a period of 15 to 30 days after vaccination, there was a 20% increase in deaths compared to the control group. A follow-up survey was conducted of the children identified as suffering severe acute neurological events within 7 days of pertussis immunization. This survey showed that after 10 years, significantly more children with such illnesses die or suffer subsequent educational, behavioral, or neurological deficits than expected by comparison with controls. Miller, et al., 1993, and that's page 23. Skip over. All right, this is page 25. If vaccines do not produce a profit, drug companies will turn to other drugs that do. Vaccine promoters make the claim that everyone must continue to comply with government recommendations or the diseases will return. Is that not what you hear today? Is that not what they continue to promote? Vaccine promoters make the claim that everyone must continue to comply with government recommendations or the diseases will return, but they have no proof that this will occur. Many diseases disappeared long ago without the benefit of vaccines. Typhoid, yellow fever, etc. Vaccines in current use have only been widely used since the 1940s. So what were we doing for the rest of all humanity? How are we surviving? How are we not getting eradicated by these by these diseases running rampant? Because we had a situation where we had medicines out of the earth that the Most High gave us. Now reports, this is page 27, reports of the dangers associated with vaccines are vehemently denied by the vast industry that controls the media. Let me get this, the vaccine reactions. All the vaccines, page 37, all of the vaccines have significant adverse effects. These can be separated into two groups. A, immediate or short-term reactions that occur soon after a given vaccine, and B, delayed or long-term reactions. Immediate reactions include fevers, allergic responses, deafness, convulsions, paralysis, central nervous system disease, resulting in temporary or permanent disabilities and death. Delayed reactions may be more insidious and less obvious. They can also result in persistent conditions that include epilepsy, mental retardation, learning disabilities, and behavioral disorders. So now you wonder why kids are high in ADHD, AD, and all this other stuff. Chemicals used in the preparation and preservation and preserving of the solution. These chemicals include mercury, formaldehyde, aluminum, and a variety of other known toxic materials. These adverse vaccine reactions are notoriously underreported. A 1994 survey of 159 doctors, Office of the National Vaccine Information Center, NVIC, revealed that only 18% of doctors said they make a report to the government when a child suffers a serious health problem following vaccination. Physicians do not want to admit that they have caused a problem. They like to think that their interventions are helpful, not harmful. They have also been assured and instructed by the vaccine industry that certain reactions that parents regularly observe, such as brain damage and death, cannot be attributed to the vaccines. Can you believe that? They said they make sure certain reactions that parents regularly observe, such as brain damage and death, cannot be attributed to the vaccine. And page 38. It would have occurred anyway, regardless of the shot. That's what they say. Case reports of severe reactions are ignored and dismissed. Results in constant denial of claims for compensation for vaccine reactions and absolute refusal to report adverse reactions. The United States government, it said about the United States government intervened and removed all vaccine manufacturer liability, assuming and limiting damage claims and removing the possibility of any other compensation. This was the origin of the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act in 1986 and the Vaccine Compensation Amendments in 1987. So the vaccines were so safe and efficient, why would you remove liability? Why would you try to put yourself in a place to where I can't claim these things damage if they're so safe and efficient? So now, I'm out of time and I'm over time. But now, so that's what you have in the course. This book has a lot of information. You know, it's real good with going over everything with vaccines and, you know, a lot of things to be aware of and keep an eye out for. So, of course, the biggest thing, and you can actually find Dr. Randall Newton's Starter. You can find him on Facebook. You know, he has a page, you know, with everything. But the biggest thing he says is, you know, eating healthier. You know, changing your diet. Being assured to make sure that you do more of those things. So, but it still has a lot of good information, but just want to cover a lot of things. But nevertheless, I think we get the point. Beat it in the head over with a stick. So if you still watch this and get the vaccine or, you know, getting the vaccines, I don't know what to tell you at that point in time. I hopefully brought out information upon information, you know, so apologies for all those it was death by words in PowerPoint, but I do understand, but I wanted to make sure that for those that, take good notes and information-wise, I want to make sure you guys can go back and review, but that book has a lot more good information. I probably won't bring that again in the near future, but the next one is just eugenics and, you know, the Negro Project, Margaret Sanger, Bill Gates, more of that information, but hopefully learned you got something from this one, you know, Most High willing. So, and with that, any questions with anything? I doubt you guys have questions, but any questions, I always got to ask. Go ahead, say what you got to say.
Pretty much everything that the brother just covered right now. If you guys ever have a chance to hit this up, it's called Psychiatry, an Industry of Death Museum, and it's off of Hollywood. It's free of charge last I checked. I know the kids and a couple of the sisters here went on a trip a couple years ago. But basically, this is what it is. It says, located within the CCHR's international headquarters in Hollywood, California, this state-of-the-art museum documents how psychiatry is an industry driven by profits, its pretended help often resulting in death. So it just covers, it has everything documented. Everything documented. Got some? You have a mic out there? Can you shoot on the mic, please?
It's closed right now, but they can go online and it has documentaries and videos that show everything on there.
The water.
All right, that's it. That's all. All right, family, shoot. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Appreciate those with patience. But anyone that you know of trying to get the vaccine, thinking about getting the vaccine, may have gotten the vaccine, have them watch part 1 and part 2. look at the information, the research, because of course, with our people, they believe if Esau said, they believe it. If your people said, no, can't be. You know, that's how we be. So, I mean, hopefully information, the sources, gets them to look, question something, but yeah, avoid them shots at all costs. I'd risk my chance with whatever the disease or sickness is before I get the vaccine that they claim supposedly gonna help me get better. So, nevertheless, with that, I say shalom.